Hey everybody! So today we have a special guest, author Matt Phillips, who recently published an article, Debunking Myths. Matt, welcome to our little interview. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me back.
So once again, it's a Friday afternoon for Matt, though he works, sounds like 7 days a week, so the weekend isn't necessarily here. Quick thing about Matt. Matt has actually written for Runners Connect for a while. He is a run conditioning coach, video game analyst, and he also is a sports therapist. And if you want to learn more about Matt, check out his site at Sport Injury Matt. That's Matt with two T's, so sportinjurymatt.co.uk. And as you can guess, Matt is in the UK. So anyways, Matt, I wanted to jump in. So the article you wrote is Debunking Myths, which I love. And you highlighted four. I'm sure you probably could have done 400. Because whether it's running or anything, there's no shortage of myths. And the first one I want to talk about, and this one I think is the best. You probably should have put it at the very end, but this one I think is the best. Not stretching enough. And I love to read that because I never stretch. And when I tell it to people, they're like, how do you not stretch? You've run so much, how do you not stretch? And before I ramble too much more, I just want to say that the takeaway that you put from that, and I'm quoting you, is that stretching is unlikely to do anything to prevent injury. So our audience is going to love to hear you talk more about this.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm pleased because it's kind of one of my personal obsessions, and it's something which is still refusing to go. And I think mainly it's fueled by therapists themselves and kind of articles, because basically a lot of our beliefs come from the idea that if something hurts, then it's because it's tight. And we see this all the time. And my favourite thing is I'll get someone come into the clinic, a runner, and they'll rub the back of the hamstring and go, oh, my hamstrings are so tight. I know what the problem is, they're tight, so I've got to stretch them. And then I'll say to them, just out of interest, just touch your toes for me. And they'll bend down to this gracious touch toe position. And I look at them and go, so what's the problem? And they'll go, well, my hamstrings are tight. And I'll say, touch your toes again for me. And they'll come up again. And I'll go, so what's the problem? My hamstrings are tight. You know what? I've been known to do this maybe 10 times until the coin drops and they'll go, my hamstrings aren't tight, are they? And I've gone, ka-ching. Fantastic. Well, we can start talking. And it's just this kind of adjective we use, therapists and runners, where if something hurts, we'll grab it and go, oh, it's tight. But the consequences of this is we automatically assume that if something hurts, then the solution is going to be to stretch it. So what I try and do is elicit from my runners, in the majority of cases, unless somebody comes and goes, my hamstrings are tight and they can't bend forwards and get their hands past their thighs, which is rarely the case, then I kind of try to elicit the fact that it's not tight. What they're trying to say is it hurts, it's painful.
Sure.
And so we'll go down the road, okay, so why is it painful? I don't know, what have you done? I've been out 5 times this week, every day. Okay, so what's your hamstring telling you? I don't know, it's tired, it's knackered. It can't do what I'm asking it to do. Brilliant. So what's the solution going to be? Let's make it stronger. At the moment, your body can't do what we're asking it to do. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are cases when it might be a flexibility issue, but 9 times out of 10, because of the fact that running isn't like martial arts, you're not trying to kick someone in the head, hopefully. You don't need that much range. So 9 times out of 10, it's not a flexibility problem.
This is a sidetrack, and the reason I love learning from you is because you have a very practical approach. So when I had my run shop, I would have people come in that would go to a physician, and I'm not knocking all physicians, but not all are created equal, and they wouldn't do that practical analysis like you just literally just did, and that can save people a lot of things. The one final point I guess want to just clarify. So you're not necessarily advocating don't stretch at all. I think do you still see some value in stretching? It's just people are trying to achieve some level of flexibility that they don't need.
Yeah, I mean, we should never say never because we've got to treat everyone as individuals. And yeah, I do see some runners, more normally guys than girls, because traditionally most female runners have got more flexibility than male runners. Generalizing, but that's generally correct.
Sure.
And guys tend to be maybe strong enough in certain areas, but not enough range of movement. But I try and change the word. I don't like the word stretch. I think stretch is something we need to get rid of.
Okay.
I prefer talking about mobility, which is totally different because flexibility isn't a skill. Flexibility, being able to touch your toes is not a skill. It won't make you a better kicker. It won't make you a better martial artist or dancer. Mobility is the ability to move through a range, but with control. and at the right time, at the right speed. And that's what a martial artist does. That's what a ballet artist does. To a certain extent, although on a much lower scale, that's what a runner does when they extend their hip behind them. But the big difference is when we extend our hip behind us, we're only really doing it a few degrees more than when we walk. Okay, it's like 15 compared to 12 or something. There's research that shows this. So all of these online videos which base themselves on stretch those hip flexors. There's a new stretch. Here's another one. Try this swan pose. Bend your leg around your neck and then touch your toes and twist your head. Why? You don't need that level of flexibility. What you may need is the control. You might need to move your leg back maybe a certain different way, or just be able to keep the pelvis a certain way. So that's totally not flexibility, that's mobility.
Excellent. Good to hear that. So the next one, this one hits home, having sold running shoes for 12 years. And I think one of the myth that you kind of talk about is that as far as like labeling people and the wrong shoes and this and that. So from a fitting standpoint, trying to get that right shoe for people, it's not, you don't necessarily see as much value as there's like a round foot and a round shoe. You got to put them together. That there's more freedom, if you will. And the 2 points that you kind of make on that, and I do agree a bit, is that labeling is bad. So we label somebody as an overpronator. And well, what is an overpronator? What does that measure? It's not really the scale, right? But the biggest takeaway is that don't change quickly. Don't go from a motion control shoe to a purely cushion shoe, which has no support. Don't do that big drop. That's kind of the takeaway. But I'd love to hear some more thoughts from you on the role of shoes with runners and injuries and so forth.
Yeah, so there's I'm not saying there's not a right shoe for the right person. There's definitely the right shoe for the right person. The only problem is we just don't know how to tell which is the right shoe for the right person yet. Sure. We thought we did once upon a time. And the whole kind of how high your arch sits when you run or how low it goes when you run in mid-stance seemed like a nice, tidy way of categorizing all runners. But unfortunately, research has shown quite clearly now that there's not much better than a 50% chance of you going with a high arch to a particular running shot, being given a shoe for people with high arches and actually being better off. You may as well, with those odds, just flip a coin and say, I'll have that shoe or that one. The best research or the best evidence we've got for what shoe to choose, unfortunately, it's not a great model. It's just comfortable. But you can imagine if you went to a shop and the guy's trying to sell you a fancy pair of shoes for $150 and you go, okay, how do you know these are the one for me? And you go, put them on. Are they comfy? Good, they're the right shoe for you. You're not really going to give $150 for that sort of advice. It sells much better if you go, right, get on the treadmill, take this video, let's slow it down. Look where your arch has gone to. See how low that is? That's too low. But that's the problem. Because when you look at the reality, you'll look at in my presentations, I'll look at, I don't like doing an N=1, but Haile Gebrselassie is probably the most famous distance runner of all time. And I like showing that image, which is available on YouTube and on my website, of where every time he runs, he's in mid-stance and his medial, the ankle on the inside, practically touches the ground every time he runs. And if he went into some shoe shops I'm aware of, they'd be like, oh, freeze, don't go out, you're going to hurt yourself, and put on these motion control shoes. Whereas he runs in a very minimalistic shoe, and as far as I know, he's pretty good at it. So we haven't got a very good model to use apart from comfort. And like you said, you want to make sure you don't swap from one type of height or stack or shoe width to something too different, because one thing the body doesn't like too much, or the nervous system, is sudden change. So yeah, it's still an area which there's a lot of research being done on, but we just got to get rid of the stuff we know that's not true. We might not know what's true, but we just got to get rid of the stuff which has kind of been filling up our minds in the meantime.
Sure. Yeah, and I think we both see the value in gait analysis. I mean, one of your descriptions is you're a gait analyst. But what I would add to that, just for our audience, that it's like it's a puzzle. Like take Herb Gebrselassie, who has really low arches, which I didn't know that. You have to put everything together. You have to. So if somebody came into my shop and was running in a shoe with zero support, had no injuries whatsoever, and I did a gait analysis and they had the flattest feet in the world, I cannot put them in a motion control shoe because you have to take everything into account to really define what type of shoe they should go in. I do think as an industry, we've overfit people. We've put people in too much structure. And the reason I say that is you look at like the running boom, the Frank Shorter years, the 70s and this and that, 120-mile weeks, I think was common in racing flats, right? So I do think the industry has gotten a little too structured. Maybe not necessarily need to go back to something with no support. So I just kind of want to throw some 2 cents out on that. The next one, this one I find really interesting, is the concept of heel striking, that heel striking is, quote, bad. And you cite a study, and this one's really cool, so heel striking is, quote, bad. In a 10K, some studies that were done at 10K distance, 89% of people heel strike. And then at 32K, 93% of people heel strike. So your point is, if heel striking is bad, then pretty much everybody is running bad, right? So again, let's hear your views on heel striking.
Yeah, again, I hear myself talking about this, and I see myself writing about it, and I often get these kind of, oh, everyone knows this, Matt, what are you doing? You're just talking about the same old rubbish, and surely everyone knows by now, but it's really just a drop in the ocean, because I surround myself with peers and people who, preach the same sort of, from the same book as me, but we're just a drop in the ocean, and every time I get a runner coming in who's going, I've got a load of pain in my knees, but I know the problem is I'm a heel striker. I'm like, oh, geez, my work hasn't been done yet. I've still got a lot to do. And unfortunately, again, the myth is still being perpetuated by, a lot of the time, sadly to say, therapists who just haven't managed to kind of open their minds to a little bit of evidence-based practice yet. So we look at actually what happens. I often quote Peter Larson, who has got the... this name of the website's just gone now. Not Running Research Junkie, that's Craig Payne. He's got the shoe website. I'll have to think of it. I'll come to you in a sec. Pete Larson got a fantastic website. I've totally forgot his name. Anyway, so with his students, he went to a marathon. This was years ago. This was like 2010 or something. He's done some since. And out of curiosity, he's a biologist by trade. He's got a very analytical, curiosity mind. He went and started photographing runners. And I think he got to something like 1,000 runners at the 10K mark of a marathon in Manchester, USA. And he photoed their feet. And then they all went over to the something like I think it was the 32K mark. And they took photos again. And they managed to then sort out these photos in his lounge or something. And they found something like 286 of the same runners. And essentially they showed that in the beginning, at the 10K mark, there was something like 89% of runners were landing on their heel first. Okay. And then by the time they get to the 32K mark, then it was like 93, 94%, and nobody was force striking. Nobody was landing with their forefoot. So this idea that heel striking is bad and we should all be trying to transfer to kind of a mid or forefoot is, again, unfortunately, is a myth, which maybe has come from the world of sprinting or seeing shots of famous kind of faster runners, I don't know. But the fact is, and the lesson is, it's not the heel that's the issue at all. It's if your foot lands with a straight knee, a fully extended knee, quite far away. If you imagine that was my centre of mass, my body, if my leg lands out here on a straight knee, chances are I'm going to land on the heel. But the heel's not the issue. The problem is you're landing this far away from your body. And the knee, that's why you get the knee pain potentially. Okay. You can land on your heel back here. You can land on your heel right underneath the knee, which is where we kind of say you want to be worked towards. So it's not where you land foot-wise, it's the angle in your knee, depending on what speed you run. Because this is another thing. I go along the seafront. I love the seafront. I live by the sea, was born by the sea. And as I'm running, I can't help looking at other humans running. And occasionally I see these guys who are running at a slow pace, well, a fairly slow pace, but their legs are moving like this. The heel's all the way up here, and they're just running at a really, really high cadence because they're trying to run in a way where they don't land on the heel. Yeah. When really, at that speed, they should be landing on their heel. There's nothing wrong with it at all. It's natural at certain speeds and natural for a lot of people.
Sure. And running shoes are designed for heel striking. If you look at the bottom of the outsole, there's a groove in there, almost like a crunch zone in a car or something, to try to dissipate that energy being transferred. So, and the other thing too, which if people aren't quite believing what you're saying, try walking normal, and then try walking on your toes or on your forefoot for 10 minutes, and you'll feel the difference right away, and the extra load that you're putting on your calf and everything else. So interesting. And I actually just want to circle back because I misread your quote. So you're talking at marathon distance. The study says that at 10K, 89% of people were found on their heels. So 11% aren't on their heels. But when you get to 32K, so what's a marathon? 43K? So near the end, it's all the way up to 93% of people are on their heels. So I mean, it's pretty much a majority. The last thing,
and I've done it as well since. I did it myself. I mean, I love other people's research, but when I get the chance, I do it myself. And on my website, there's some photos that I took at my local marathon. I wasn't running that year, and I had runners in there. It was a very hot year, so I wanted to track them. And I took some photos, some video footage at I think it was like the 10-mile mark or something. And then I had time to get over to the 22-mile mark. I was trying to check on my runners. And again, it just shows I recorded some 3.5-hour marathon runners. No, I think they were 3-hour marathon runners, which is a decent speed. I wish I could run a 3-hour marathon again at my age. And you know what? 90% of them on the heel. And none of them had heels touching their bum and going past 90 degrees. I hear that a lot as well. Runners should be running with the heel pickup at 90 degrees, and you don't do that. Unless you're sprinting or running really fast, it just doesn't happen. And we've got to look more at what actually happens and not what the textbooks from like 10, 20 years ago say should happen.
Sure. So actually perfect lead into the next thing. You talk about cadence, and you actually use the example of Usain Bolt. So if you think about it like from a biomechanics standpoint, right, when you land on your heel, your foot is very flexible, bones aren't all locked up. It's kind of more trying to absorb impact, whereas when you're on your toes, the nature of your foot is it's locked up and it's more about transferring energy. So if anybody's being chased down the street, chances are you're on your toes, right? So go back to that 32K mark, and all of a sudden a rabid dog comes running after you. I think less, instead of 93% on their heels, it's probably going to be 7% on their heels, because to run fast, you're going to get on your toes. And I remember I did a study way back in the day at Harvard University, and they wanted to measure what was the limiting factor in speed and so forth. And there was this force plate that you would land on and would measure your impact and so essentially it's measuring cadence. And so you use the example like Usain Bolt, who runs 221 steps per minute, if I said that term correctly. So there's really, though, let me try to circle back and get a question here. I'm not articulating myself well on this Friday. There's no magic number for cadence. There's not like 180 is the optimum cadence for people. It really depends on what are you running? Are you running an ultra marathon, or are you running a 100-meter race? Two completely different gaits, right? All on the heel and the ultra, all on your toes on a 100-meter race. And cadence kind of comes into play with that. So again, I'd love to hear you elaborate just a little bit more on that notion of this perfect cadence that we should all try to target, and that's really a myth.
Yeah, again, like you say, it's one of those myths that refuses to die. And before I do a workshop or a presentation or something, I make sure that I'm not just criticizing something that's changed. So I do a quick Google search on cadence, and sure enough, I'll see an article that's just been written or released somewhere online saying that, they say things like, check your cadence, count how many times your leg is touched or your foot's touching the ground in 30 seconds, multiply by 4. I remember one the other day I looked up and it said, if you are running at 180 steps per minute, or I think you guys in the States talk about just the one leg, 90 steps per minute on the one foot, give yourself a pat on the back because you are running at a good cadence. And I'm like, no. Because the trouble is, I see a lot of runners who are trying to maintain too high a cadence. Now, as a general rule, I work a lot these days with recreational runners. We still get a few elites in, but I enjoy running with runners who I can beat if I have to take them out. So every year my runners get slower and slower and slower. But anyway, so I tend to say as a rule, if you're running at slower than a 10-minute mile, then your cadence shouldn't really be much over 160. Maybe in the case of women, it tends to be a little bit higher. But if you're running a 10-minute mile and your cadence is over kind of 170, plus other factors as well, but chances are you might have read something, or for some reason you're doing it, you're just shuffling along. You can have very little flight time, you're not getting any energy or produced from one foot to the other. and it's something I help just as many people probably by slowing their cadence down as I do to maybe encourage them to increase it gradually. It's a fantastic variable we can play with because it's a wonderful external stimulus. It's a global stimuli where we don't just say try and straighten your knee or try and touch here. We just say listen to this metronome and do whatever your body wants to do. And people achieve a cadence change in different ways, which is why it's such an effective tool. But again, we're not chasing a certain optimum cadence. It all depends very much on what we're trying to achieve.
Sure. And, this is what I love about being able to do interviews like this and what Runners Connect kind of brings to our audience, because running is such a lonely sport in so many different ways. But if you don't have access to communities and so forth, you go online and you read things, and unfortunately not everything on the web is accurate, right? Anybody can put anything up unless it's maybe Wikipedia. So you read stuff and you think like, oh, I got to stretch for a half hour before I run, or I got to hit this cadence. And if you don't have access to people like yourselves kind of saying, no, this isn't accurate, then unfortunately people go down these paths, which, in a lot of ways kind of hurt them. So, so with that said, Matt, as always, I really appreciate you coming on. You know a lot. You've written so much for Runners Connect. So there's a lot of knowledge that you've shared with us. And again, I really encourage people to go to Matt's site. It's Sport Injury Matt, M-A-T-T, so 2 T's, sportinjurymat.co.uk, and learn more from Matt. So Matt, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me back, because like I say, it's as soon as I think our job's been done, I realise we're just a drop in the ocean. So the more we can get these videos out to people who wouldn't normally watch them, then the better, because we can really help runners effectively just by clearing up a few of these misconceptions.
For sure. Awesome. So thank you, Matt. You have a good rest of your day, okay?
Thank you very much. See you.